I won't let you regret it. If there's an everything and off into the brush, I won't get in no trouble. George, instead of saying a word, okay, bring your mind on over here by the fire. It's going to be nice listening to him. Look at him. And please, don't give up no more fire. You'll let her die down, leaving her head on the sand. And as the blaze dropped from the fire, the sphere of light grew smaller. The curving branches disappeared, and only a faint glimmer showed where the tree trunks were from the darkness when he called. George, you asleep. Note, what do you want? Let's have different color rabbits. George, sure we will. George said sleepily, red and blue and green rabbits, like millions of them. Hurry one. George, like I've seen in the fair in Sacramento. Sure, hurry one. Cause I can use as well roll away. George, turn ribbon the cake. You can use as well go to help, said George. Shut up now. The red light danced on the coals. Up the hill, the river, the coyote neighbors, and the dog answered from the other side of the stream. The sycamore leaves whispered in a little night breeze. The house was a long, rectangular building. Inside, the walls were whitewashed and the floor unpainted. In three walls there were small, square windows, and in support a solid door with a wooden latch. Against the walls were three bunks, five of them made of wood planking, and the other three showing their good glass ticking. Over each bunk there was made an apple box with the opening forward so that it made the shelves for the personal belongings of the occupants of the bunk, and these shelves were loaded with little articles, soap and talcum powder, and those Western magazines Branch men loved to read, and saw that and the secretly believed, and there were medicines on the shelves, and little bottles, combs, and some nails on the box side, a few nephews. Near one wall there was a black cast iron stove, its stovepipe going straight up from the ceiling in the middle of the room, with a big square table littered with playing cards, and around it were grouped boxes for the players to sit on. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, the sun threw its bright dust above through one of the side windows, and in and out of the beams light shot like a shooting star. The wooden latch raised. The door opened, and a tall, stoop-shouldered old man came in. He was dressed in blue jeans, and he carried a big bush broom in his left hand. He called him King George, and behind George was the boss was expecting you last night. The old man said he was sore as hell when he wasn't here to go out this morning. He pointed with his right arm, and out of the sleeve came a round stick like wrist, but no hand. You can have them to bed. There, he said, indicating to us near the stove. George stepped over and threw his blanket down on the burlap sack of straw that was a mattress. He looked into his box shelf and then picked a small yellow pen from it. Said, what the hell's this? I don't know, said the old man. Says positively feels like roaches and other scourges. What the hell kind of head is giving up? Anyway, we don't want to know, parents, rabbit. The old swamper shifted his spoon and held it between his elbow and his thigh while he held out his hand for his hand. He studied the label carefully. Tell you what, he said finally. Last night that had just said was a blacksmith held a nice fellow all that free the God doesn't want to eat. He used to wash his hands even after he ate. Then how come he got grayback? George was looking up at slow anger. Let me put his Bible on the neighbor's bunk and sat down. He watched George with open mouth. Tell you what, said the old swamper. This blacksmith name was like he was the kind of guy that would put the stuff around even if there wasn't no box just to make sure. Please, tell you what he used to do at meals. He'd peel his boiled potatoes and he'd take out every little spot, no matter what kind, before he did it. As if it was a red splotch on the head, he'd scrape it off. Finally quit about the food. That's the kind of guy he was clean. He would rest on Sundays, even when he wasn't going no place, put on a necktie even, and then sit in the house. I ain't so sure, said George desperately. What did you say he quit for? The old man put the yellow in his pocket, and he rubbed his bristly wide fingers with his knuckles. Why he just quit? The way I was says it was the food. just wanted to leave. Didn't give no other reason but the food. Just said he knew my time one night, the way any guy would. George lifted his kick and looked underneath it. He leaned over and inspected the bathroom closely. Immediately Lemmy got up and did the same with his bed. Finally, George seemed satisfied. He unrolled the binder and put things on the shelf, his razor and bar of soap, his old man's bottle of pills, his linen and leathery stand. Then he made his bed up neatly with blankets. The old man said, "I think you will be out here in a minute." He was sure when he wasn't here this morning. Come right when he was eating breakfast and said, "Where the hell them new men can be business table but hell too." George patted a wrinkle out of his bed and sat down. Business table but hell? He asked. Sure. Business table. Box vinegar. Vinegar? Yeah. Nice fellow. Got crooked back where a horse kicked him. The boss gets him hell when he's mad. Business table but don't give a damn about that. He reads a lot. Got what's in his room. What kind of a guy is the boss? George asked. Well, he's a pretty nice fellow. Gets pretty mad sometimes, but he's pretty nice. Tell me what he done Christmas. Drank a gallon of whiskey right here and said, "Drink hard boy." Christmas comes but once a year. The hell he did. Whole gallon? Yes, sir. Super. We had fun. The rest of the room come in that night. Little sinner named they took after the dinner. Done pretty good, too. The guy wouldn't let him in his seat, so the nigger got him if he couldn't eat his food. Never said he would have killed the nigger. The guy said on account of the nigger's got a crooked back, never can in his seat. Because he relished the memory. After that, the guy went in to Holy Head and raised hell. I didn't go there. I ain't got the no more. Lenny was just finishing making his bed. The glass ranged again and the door opened. A little stocky man stood in the open doorway. He wore blue jean trousers, a flannel shirt, a black unbuttoned vest, and a black coat. His thumbs were stuck in his belt on each side of a square steel buckle. On his head was a soiled brown Stetson hat, and he wore high-heeled boots and spurs to prove he was not a laboring man. The old swamper looked quickly at him, and then shuffled to the door, running his whiskers with his knuckles as he went. Them guys just come, he said, and shuffled past the boss and out the door. The boss stepped into the room with a short, quick step of a fast-legged man. I rose hurried and read by one of two men this morning. You got your work. George reached into his pocket and produced his slip and candy stamp to the boss. It wasn't hurried and read his fault. Says right here on the slip that you were to be here for work this morning. George looked down at his feet. But rather he left a bum to it, he said. We will walk 10 miles. Said he was here when we wasn't. We couldn't get no right in the morning. The boss winked his eyes. Well, I had to send out the green team short buckle. Won't do any good to go out now till after dinner. He pulled his time, pulled out of his pocket, and opened it where a pencil was stuck between the leaves. George scowled meaningfully at Lenny and let nodding to show that he understood. The boss licked his pencil. What's your name? George Milton. And what's your name? George said. His name was small. The names were entered in the book. LUC. This is the 28th. The 28th. He closed the book. Where you boys been working up around me? Said George. Two letters. Yeah, said George. The boss pointed a playful finger at Lenny. He ain't much of a cover, is he? No, he ain't, but he's sure the hell of a good worker. Strong as a bull. Lenny smiled to himself. Strong as a bull, he repeated. George scowled at him and let drop his head in shame of having forgotten. The boss said succinctly, listen, small. Let's break.
아, 저기 홍태호가 얘기한 걸 가지고
The boss turned on
응?
George. Then why don't you
야,
let
한국
him?
공부하는 거야?
Was he trying to put over? George spoke loudly. Oh, I ain't saying he's right, he ain't. But I think he's a goddamn good worker. He can put up a 400-pound bale. The boss deliberately put a little book in his pocket. He hooked his thumb in his belt and went one night nearly closed. Say, what you telling me? I said, what thing you got in this guy? You tuck him and stay away from him. No, poor guy. Why do you think I'm telling him out? Well, I never seen one guy take so much trouble for another guy. I just want to know what your ignorant Island George said. He's my cousin, I told you, old lady, I take care of him. He got hit in the head by a horse when he was a kid. Secret. Just ain't right. But you couldn't see anything you tell him. The boss turned half away. Well, God knows he... Don't need any brains, but Barley does. But don't you try to put nothing over me. I got my eyes on you. Why, we quit the meeting. Job was done, said George promptly. What kind of job? We was getting at acceptable. All right. But don't try to put nothing over cause you can't get away with nothing. I've seen wives die before. Go on a slipping rain teams after dinner. There's a of fire that the threshing machines go out with swim. Swim? Yeah, big tall Skinner. You'll see him at dinner. He turned abruptly and went to the door, but before he went out he turned and looked for long moments at the two men. When the sound of his footsteps had died away, George turned on Letty. He wasn't going to say a word. He was going to leave your big flapper shut and leave me to the company. Damn near lost the job. Letty stared hopelessly at his hand. I forgot. George? Yeah, you forgot. You always forget that I got to talk you out of it. He sat down heavily on the bunk. Now he's got his eye on us. Now we've got to be careful and not make no slips. You keep your big flapper shut after this. He fell no rose to silence. George, what do you want now? By one who kicked in the head with no horse. Was I George? Be a damn good thing if he was. George said viciously. Saved everybody a hell of a lot of trouble. He said, I want your cousin. George? Well, that was a lie. And I'm damn glad it was. If I was a relative of yours, I'd shoot myself. He stopped suddenly, stepped to the open front door, and peered out. Say, what the hell are you doing? Listen. The old man came slowly into the room. He had his tools in his hand, and at his heels there walked the drag-footed sheep-dog, great muscle and wristband, blindfold eyes. The dog struggled lazily to the side of the room and lay down, grunting softly to himself and licking his grizzled, moth-eaten coat. The swamper watched him until he was settled by one person. I watched him standing in the shade, a minute scratching my dog. I just now finished swamp him out the watch house. He was poking his ears into our business. George said, I don't like nobody to get nosy. The old man looked uneasily from George to Letty, and then back. I knew somewhere, he said. I didn't hear nothing you guys was saying. I ain't interested in nothing you was saying. The guy on a ranch don't never live, nor don't ask me no questions. Yeah, right, he don't, said George, slightly modified. Not that he wants to stay with him long, but he was reassured by Swanford's defense. Come on, and set down a minute, he said. That's a hell of an old dog. Yeah, I am average since he was a pup. God, he was a good sheep-dog when he was younger. He stood his heel against the wall, and he rubbed his white rippled cheek with his knuckles. How'd you like the boss? He asked. Pretty good. Seems written. He's a nice fellow. The Swanford agreed. You got to take him right. At that moment, the young man came into the house, a thin young man with a brown face, with brown eyes and head of tightly curled hair. He wore wood gloves on his left hand, and, like the boss, he wore high-heeled boots. "See my old man?" he asked. Miss Wamford said he was relieved a moment ago. Curly went over to the cook house. "I think I'll try to catch him," said Curly. His eyes passed over the new man, and he stopped. He glanced coldly at George, and then at Letty. His arms gradually bent at the elbow, and his hands closed in the fist. He stiffened and went into a slight crouch. His glance was at once calculating and pugnacious. Letty squirmed under the look and shifted his feet nervously. Curly stepped gingerly close to him. "You're the new guy the old man was waiting for." "We just come in," said George. "Let the big guy talk." Letty twisted with embarrassment. George said, "I suppose you don't want to talk." Curly laughed and bodied around. I cried. "He's got to talk when he's supposed to. What the hell are you getting into it for?" "We travel together," said George coldly. "Oh, so it's the way." George was tense and motionless. "Yeah, it's the way." Letty was looking helplessly to George for instruction. "And he won't let the big guy talk," he said. "He can talk if he wants to tell you anything." He nodded slightly to Letty. "We use him," said Letty softly. Curly stared levelly at him. "Well, next time you enter when you're supposed to." He turned toward the door and walked out, and his elbow was still bent out a little. George watched him out, and then he turned back to the swamper. "Say, what the hell he got on his shoulder?" Letty didn't do nothing to him. The old man looked cautiously at the door to make sure no one was listening. "That's the boss's son," he said quietly. Curly's pretty handy. He's done quite a bit. He's a right wing, and he's handy. "Well, let him be handy," said George. "He don't have to take after Letty." Letty didn't do nothing to him. What's he got against Letty? The swamper considered. "Well, tell you what. Curly's like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys. He's all the time picking scraps with big guys, kind of like he's mad at him because he ain't a big guy. You see little guys like that, ain't you? Always scrappy." "Sure," said George. "I've seen plenty of little guys, but this Curly better not make no mistakes about Letty. Letty ain't handy, but this Curly pump is gonna get hurt if he messes around with Letty." "Well, Curly's pretty handy," the swamper said pensively. "Never did seem right to me. I suppose Curly jumped a big guy and listened. Everybody says what a game guy Curly is, and I suppose he does the same thing and gets licked. Then everybody says the big guy ought to hit somebody his own size, and maybe they gang up on the big guy. Never did seem right to me. Seems like Curly ain't giving nobody a chance." George was watching the door. He said ominously, "Well, you better watch out for Letty. Letty ain't no fighter, but Letty's strong and quick, and Letty don't know no rules." He walked to the square table and sat down on one of the boxes. He gathered some of the cards together and shuffled them. The old man sat down on another box. "Don't tell Curly I said none of this. He floods me. He just don't give a damn. Won't ever get hands caught, his old hands." The boss. George cut the cards and began turning them over, looking at each one and throwing it down on a pile. He said, "This guy Curly sounds like a son of a bitch to me. I don't like mean little guys. Seems to me like his worst lately," said the swamper. "He got married a couple of weeks ago. Wife lives over in the boss's house. Seems like Curly has prospered ever since he got married." George grunted. Maybe he'd show an off for his wife. The swamper went to his gossip. "You seen that rug on his left hand?" "Yeah, I seen it." "Well, that rug's full of Vaseline." "Vaseline? What the hell for?" "Well, I tell you what Curly says he's keeping that hand soft for his wife." George studied the cards absorbedly. "That's a dirty thing to tell around," he said. The old man was reassured. He had drawn an derogatory statement from George. He felt safe now, and he spoke more confidently. "We told you see Curly's wife. married 2 weeks and got the eye. Maybe that's why Curly's pants is full of pants. I seen her with Flip. The eye Flip, Mr. Klein's dinner. Hell of a nice fella. Flip don't need to wear no high-heel boots on a grain team. I seen her with Flip. The eye Curly never seen, and I seen her with Paul in the eye. George pretended the lack of endurance. Looked like he was gonna have fun. The swamper stood up from his box. You know what I think? George did not answer. Well, I think Curly's married. They paused. He ain't the first, said George. There's plenty done that. The old man moved toward the door, and his ancient dog lifted his head and peered about, and then got painfully to his feet to follow. I got to set out the wash basin for the guy. The team won't be in it for long. You guys gonna up violent. Yeah, you won't tell Curly nothing. I said, hell no. Well, you look her over, mister. You see if she ain't a dog. He stepped out the door into the brilliant sunshine. George laid down his cards thoughtfully, turned his piles of 3. He built 4 clubs on his base pile. The sun square was on the floor now, and the fly whipped through it like sparks. The sound of jingling harness and the crows of cutting lady axles sounded from outside. From the distance came a clear call. Cable, Buck 2, FTA, Cable Buck. And then, where the hell is the dog, damn it? George stared at his solitaire lake, and then he plunged the cards together and turned around to Letty. Letty was lying down about watching him. Look, Letty, this here ain't no setup. I'm scared you're gonna have trouble with that Curly dog. I seen that kind before. He was kind of feeling you out. He figured he's got you scared and he's gonna take a thought that you're the first chance he gets. Letty's eyes were frightened. I don't want no trouble, he said plaintively. Don't let him talk to me. George got up and went over to Letty's bunk and sat down on it. I ain't that kind of bastard, he said. I've seen plenty of them. Like the old guy says, Curly don't take no chances. He always wins. He thought for a moment, if he tangles with you, Letty, we're going to get the chance. Don't make no mistake about that. He's the boss's son. Look, Letty, he tried to keep away from him. Will you? Don't never speak to him. If he comes in here, really clear to the other side of the room. Will you do that, Letty? I don't want no trouble. Letty more. I never done nothing to him. Well, that won't do you no good if Curly wants to put himself up for a fighting. Just don't have nothing to do with him. Will you remember? Sure, George. I ain't gonna say a word. The sound of the approaching rain teemed with loudest. Some of big foot on hard ground, dread of brakes and the jingle of trace chains. Men were calling back and forth from a team. George, sitting on the bunk beside Letty, frowned as he thought. Letty asked timidly, you ain't mad, George? I ain't mad at you. I'm mad at this here Curly bastard. I hoped we was gonna get a little stake together, maybe $100. His tone was decisive. You keep away from Curly, Letty. Sure, I won't, George. I won't say a word. Don't let him hold you in Letty the sun wing. He's soft, but I am heavy. I am have what, George? Never mind. I'll tell you it. I ain't that kind of a guy. Look, Letty, if you get in any kind of trouble, you remembered what I told you to do. Letty raised up on his elbows, his face contorted with thought. Then his eyes moved sadly to George's face. If I get in any trouble, you ain't gonna let me tend the rabbit. That's not what I meant. You remembered where we had LEP last night. Down by the river? Yeah, I remember. Oh, sure, I remember. I go, there are hides in the brush. Hide till I come for you. Don't let nobody see you. Hide in the brush by the river. Say that over. Hide in the brush by the river. Down in the brush by the river. If you get in trouble. If I get in trouble. A break reached outside. I called Cable Buck. Oh, yes, Cable Buck. George said, say it over to yourself, Letty, so you won't forget it. George looked away from her and then back. He was in here a minute ago, but he went, oh. She put her hand behind her back and leaned against the door frame so that her body was thrown forward. You're the new Bella that just come, ain't you? Yeah. Letty's eyes moved down over her body, and though she did not seem to be looking at Letty, she bridled a little. She looked at her fingernails. Sometimes Curly's in here, she explained. George said gruffly, well, he ain't now. If he ain't, I guess I better look someplace else, she said plainly. Letty watched her, fascinated. George said, if I see him, I'll pass the word you were looking for him. She smiled archly and twitched her body. Nobody can blame a person for looking, she said. There were footsteps behind her, going by. She turned her head. Hi, Slim, she said. Slim, voice came through the door. Hi, good looking. I'm trying to find Curly. Slim. Well, you ain't trying very hard. I see him going to your house. She was suddenly apprehensive. My boy. She called into the house, and she turned away. George looked around at Letty. Jesus, what a tramp, he said. So that's what Curly is for a while. She's pretty, said Letty effectively. Yeah, and she sure is hygienic. Curly got his worth ahead of him. Bet she's clear out for $20. Letty still stared at the doorway where she had been. Gosh, she was pretty. He smiled admiringly. George looked quickly down at him, and then he took him by an ear and shook him. Listen to me, you crazy bastard, he said fiercely. Don't you even take a look at that bitch? I don't care what she says and what she does. I've seen him poisoned before, but I never seen no piece of jail face. Worse than her. Please believe. Letty tried to disengage her fear. I never done nothing. George knows he never. But when she was standing in the doorway, showing her legs, he wasn't looking the other way, neither. I never meant no harm. George, honest, I never. Well, you keep away from her because she's a rat trap if I ever seen one. You let Curly take a rat. He laughed himself in for it. Full of gasoline, George said disgustedly. And I bet you can draw an egg and ride into the pack of houses. Letty cried out suddenly, I don't like this place. George, this ain't no good place. I want to get out of here. We gotta keep it till we get a thing. We can't help it, honey. We'll get out as soon as we can. I don't like it no better than you do. He went back to the table and set out a new solitaire hand. No, I don't like it, he said. For 2 big side shoves out of here. If we can get you a few dollars in a coat, we'll shove off and go up the American River and can gold. We can make maybe a couple of dollars a day there, and we might get the profit. Leonard leaned eagerly toward him. Ellie, no, George. Ellie, get out of here. It's me here. We got a date, George said shortly. Shut up now. The guy felt the comment in. From the water nearby came the sound of running water and rattling basins. George studied the card. Maybe we ought to be washed up, he said. But we ain't done nothing to get dirty. The tall man stood in the doorway. He held a crushed Stetson hat under his arm while he groomed his long, black, damp hair straight back. Like the others, he wore blue jeans and a short linen jacket. When he had finished combing his hair, he moved into the room, and he moved with the majesty only achieved by royalty and master craftsmen. He was of Jerkline Skinner, the prince of the ranch, capable of driving 10, 16, even 20 mules with a single line. The leader, he was capable of killing a flight on the wheelers with a bull whip without touching the mule. There was a presence in his manner and quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. His authority was so great that his word was taken on any subject, even politics, for luck. This was Slim, the Jerkline Skinner. His passive face was ageless. He might have been 35 or 50. His ear was more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones, not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. His hands, large and lean, were as delicate in their action as those of a temple dancer. He smoothed out his crutch hat just come, said George. None of us bothered. That's what the boss said. Lynn sat down on a box across the table from George. He studied the solitaire hand that was upside down to him. Hope you get on my team, he said. His voice was very gentle. I got a pair of pumps on my team that don't know, Obama said, from a blue ball. You guys ever bust any barb? Help, yes, said George. I ain't nothing to scream about, but that big bastard there comes with us more grinning alone than most players can. Harry, who had been following the conversation back and forth with his eyes, smiled complacently with the compliment. Lynn looked approvingly at George for having given the compliment. He leaned over the table and snapped the corner of a loose card. You guys sat around together. His tone was friendly. Again, but in confidence without demanding it. Sure, said George. We kind of looked after each other. He indicated Glenn with his thumb. He ain't right. Hell of a good worker, so hell of a nice fella, but he ain't right. I've known him for a long time. Glenn looked through George and beyond him. Ain't many guys travel around together. I don't know why. Maybe everybody in the whole damn world is scared of each other. It's a lot nicer to go around with a guy you know, said George. A powerful, big-stomached man came into the house. His head still dripped water from the scrubbing and dousing. Hi, Lynn, he said, and then stopped and stared at George and Lenny. These guys need some, said Lynn by way of introduction. Glad Tom meet me, the big man said. My name's Carlson. I'm George Milton. This here's Lenny Small. Glad Tom meet me, Carlson said again. He ain't very small. He chuckled softly at his joke. Ain't small at all, he repeated. Nancy asked me, Lynn, how was the bitch? I seen she wasn't under your wagon this morning. She twanged her pups last night, said Lynn. 9 of them. I ground 4 of them right off. She couldn't feed that many. Got 5 left. Yeah, 5. I catch the biggest. What kind of dogs do you think they're gonna eat? I don't know, said Lynn. Some kind of shepherd. I guess maximum kind I've seen around here when she was in heat. Carlson went on. Got 5 pups. We're gonna keep all of them. I don't know. Have to keep them for a while so they can drink smoothies. Carlson said thoughtfully, well, look at here, Lynn. I've been thinking. That dog at Candy is so goddamn old he can't hardly walk. Stings like hell, too. Several times he comes into the house, I can't smell him for 2, 3 days. Why don't you get Candy to shoot his old dog and give him one of the pups to raise up? I can't smell that dog a mile away. Got no teeth. Damn near blind. Can't eat. Candy feeds him milk. He can't chew nothing else. George had been staring intently at Lynn. Suddenly the triangle began to move outside, slowly at first, and then faster and faster until the beat of it disappeared into one ringing sound. It stopped as suddenly as its head started. There she goes, said Carlson. Outside, there was a burst of voices as a group of men went by. Lynn stood up slowly and with dignity. You guys better come on while there's still something to eat. Won't be nothing less in a couple of minutes. Carlson stepped back to let Lynn pursue him, and then the 2 of them went out the door. Lenny was watching George excitedly. George thrummed at his cards into a messy pile. Yeah, George said. I heard him. Lenny, I'll ask him. A brown and white one. Lenny cried excitedly. Come on. Ellie, get in it. I don't know whether he got a brown and white one. Lenny didn't move from the bus. He laughed him right away. George, so he won't kill no more of him. Sure. Come on now. Get up on your feet. Lenny rolled off his bus and stood up, and the 2 of them started for the door. Just as they reached it, Curly bounced in. You see the girl around here? He demanded angrily. George said coldly, about half an hour ago, maybe. Well, what the hell was she doing? George stood still, watching the angry little man, he said insultingly. She said she was looking for you. Curly seemed really to see George for the first time. His eyes flashed over George, took in his height, measured his reach, looked at his trim middle. Well, which way she goes, he demanded at last. I don't know, said George. I didn't watch her look. Curly scowled at him and turned out the door. George said, he knows, honey, I'm scared I'm going to tangle with that bastard myself. I need to stuff Jesus crap. Come on. There won't be a damn thing left to eat. They went out the door. The sunshine playing a thin line under the window. From a distance, there could be heard a rattle of dishes. After a moment, the ancient dog walked slowly and through the open door. He gazed about his miles, half-blind eyes. He sniffed and then lay down and put his head between his paws. Curly paused into the doorway again and stood looking into the room. The dog raised his head, but when Curly jerked out, the brindled head sank to the floor again. Although there was evening brightness showing through the windows of the house, inside it was dark. Through the open door came the occasional clang of a horseshoe game, and now and then the sound of voices